What up, Fab Fanatics? On it here, back with some more flesh and blood content. Today, the talented TowerNumberNine brings you his Tall Dorinthea Blitz build he's been finding success with in online events recently. If you enjoy his content, feel free to check out his links in the description below. He has his own YouTube channel, Twitch, and blog. If you would like to support him, feel free to click on the FaB Foundry affiliate link and place an order. A small percentage of every sale goes directly to him. And of course, if you enjoy what we're doing here at FaB Foundry, we'd love it if you'd hit the subscribe button and feel free to interact with our video through likes and comments. With all that being said, here is TowerNumberNine and his Tall Dorinthea Blitz build.
I'm going to be streaming a deck tech here on my Tall Dorinthea deck, which I have been playing recently in the skirmish events. And so I'm going to go through the deck. I'm going to describe the general strategy. I'm going to go card by card, explain what the role of each thing is, talk about the different matchups, and talk about the different cards that I might add in to help deal with different situations. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to the deck tech video here. All right, so this is, of course, the great Dorinthea. So this is probably my favorite hero in the game. I really enjoy playing Dorinthea both in Classic Constructed and in Blitz, but in Blitz I've recently been having success using a very different tactic than I do in Classic Constructed. In Classic Constructed I like to play wide Dorinthea with a lot of different attacks. In Blitz I've been having more success with a tall Dorinthea build. So once per turn effect, when your weapon attack hits, you may attack an additional time with that weapon this turn. This is a very good ability, allowing you to get multiple swings with your Dawnblade. I'll now highlight Dawnblade. A standout weapon, I feel. For 1 energy, it's going to attack for 3, which is pretty efficient, but not that great on its own. However, if it hits and it's the second time that it's hit this turn, you get a +1 counter. At the beginning of your end phase, if you didn't hit this turn, you lose any +1 counters you may have gathered. But this is a great weapon in terms of getting set up and getting into a position where once you start accumulating those counters, you become extremely efficient and extremely difficult to deal with, because all of a sudden, even just with 1 counter, for 1 energy, you're swinging for 4. That's probably going to need multiple cards to defend against. If you've coupled that with some buffs, it gets even worse for your opponent, and that's going to allow you to potentially break through their defenses and get into a strong position. Metagod saying hello. Good to see you there. And yeah, so now an important thing to note is this is once per turn action. So to swing with it more than once, you're going to need to use Dorinthea's ability or another effect to allow you to hack an additional time with that weapon this turn. And you're also going to need to have Go Again. You need to have both of those. So that's something that a lot of players, I think, may miss. You have to have both the Go Again and the ability to do a second swing, or else you're not going to be able to make 2 attacks with the Dawnblade. So that's very important to know, in my opinion. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to move on here, and we're going to discuss the equipment first. So the equipment in Blitz is kind of your equivalent of the sideboard. You don't really get a real sideboard in Blitz games. All you get is 11 item slots. This deck actually only spends 10 of them because there isn't anything I would want to use the remaining slot on, but let's focus on these. So as you can see, I've put here kind of the default layout, which is going to be the Arcanite Skullcap, which is a item. So the actual arcane barrier part of Arcanite Skullcap is bad. The only class you would want to use it against is Wizard, and Wizard has better timing control than you, making it bad to use it, in my opinion. So you don't really want to be playing Arcanite Skullcap against Wizard. However, it does offer good physical defense in other matchups. So if you have less life than your opponent, it goes up to 2 block with Battle Worn, which means that if you play your blocks well, you can block for 2 and then later block for 1, blocking a total of 3 across the course of the game. This is a big improvement relative to an Iron Rot Helm, which is only going to block for 1. And especially against Ira, which is one of the key matchups, this item can be very useful. Next up, we have Courage of Bladehold. This is going to be the default chest armor that I like to equip. So Courage of Bladehold, again, offering very good armor with 2 temper. So you're either going to be able to block for 3, once for 2, and once for 1, or you're going to be able to block for 2 and then destroy it to get its ability. Its ability can be great for getting an explosive turn. I tend to equip this in almost all matchups. And I use the action to, I usually block with it once, and then instead of blocking again and destroying it with temper, I block with it again, and I don't block with it again, and then use the actual action ability in order to help me have a more explosive turn. So another very strong piece of armor. It's coupled with the Brave Forge bracers. This is the legendary equipment from Warrior from the Welcome to Rathe set. Again, blocks for 2 with Battle Worn, so great physical defense. Once per turn action, 1 energy. Your next weapon attack this turn gains +1. Activate this ability only if a weapon you control has hit this turn. It has Go Again. This is a great little ability for just pushing that attack the extra little bit further and making it more difficult for your opponent to deal with. So this is a very strong ability if you're, if you get, like, let's say that you do a hit and run and you swing and the opponent blocks, you get in with Iron Song Response or something, and you still have 2 energy floating, you can use 1 for the bracers and 1 for your second swing, and then your next attack is going to be that little bit harder to stop, and that might be the difference between hitting for the second time and getting your Dawnblade to have a +1 counter and the opponent being able to stop it. Or it might be the difference between them having to block with 2 things or just being able to block it with 1 thing. So again, very solid card. And then lastly, we have the Refraction Bolter, is maybe actually the best item available to Warrior. It blocks for only 1 with Battle Worn, so a little worse on the defense than the other items. But when your weapon attack hits, you may destroy Refraction Bolters. If you do, the attack gains Go Again. So this is a very solid. Defense. Not only do you have the ability to use it to block 1 damage, which is always useful, that extra bit of life, but also it allows you to be way more explosive. It gives you that ability to destroy this and Go Again and use that to have another swing. Like, you're coming in, you don't have anything to give you Go Again, your opponent doesn't block, you use the Refraction Bolters, come in with the second swing, all of a sudden now they really do have to block, and if they were planning to avoid blocking so that they don't give you reprise effect, all of a sudden all those reprise effects are live when they have to stop your second attack or else give you a counter. So that's Refraction Bolters. Very interesting card, very strong card. Actually, my favorite of all the equipment here for Warrior, Refraction Bolters is the only piece of equipment that I will play in every matchup. And I actually play Refraction Bolters in every matchup in both Classic Constructed and Blitz. So it really is my favorite, extremely strong card, and it's only a common, so easily obtainable as well. All right, so then we're going to talk about the alternate equipment. So these 4, the Skullcap, Courage, Bracers, and Bolters, that's what I like to equip, and that's what I'll equip if I get the chance in a normal matchup. But there is that chance that there's going to be a matchup where another thing is more suited. So first up, we have the Null Rune set. So these 3 items: Null Rune Hood, Arcane Barrier 1 head; Null Rune Robe, Arcane Barrier 1 chest; Null Rune Gloves, Arcane Barrier 1 arms. So these 3 I'm going to equip. These 3, I'm going to equip all 3 of them against a wizard. So that's going to give me Arcane Barrier 3 plus the Refraction Bolters for that little bit of extra aggression. And against a Rune Blade, I'm going to equip just the Null Rune Hood instead of the Arcanite Skullcap and leave the other physical armor on. And that's going to allow me to have a nice Arcane Barrier there to block some of Rune Blade's physical attacks, and then, or block some of Rune Blade's rune chance, while also having a lot of physical armor to block his attacks and still having aggressive items to allow me to do stuff of my own. Now, in some situations, you might say, why don't you play Null Rune Boots so that you can have maximum physical defense with all these items that can block for 2, plus the boots there, and just be really strong defensively against Rune Blade? The answer is that the Rune Blade build-up decks that you're really worried about preserving your armor for are usually going to go way lower on life than you early on in the game. So this Arcanite Skullcap is only going to block for 1 against them anyway, and therefore equipping the Null Rune Hood is going to be better than sacrificing your Bolters, because that Bolter's ability is really good and you don't want to lose it. Okay. ZSparkXX says, good evening. Yeah, good to see you, ZSpark. I'm streaming a little later than I would normally, so my apologies, guys. Normally I try to go live at 5 o'clock p.m. Today we were a little later than that, but I'm hoping this is going to be a pretty cool stream. Then the other 2 items, Fyendal Spring Tunics, that item stores up energy over time. This is honestly, like, you could just remove this. It doesn't have to be in the deck. The only deck that I would play it against is Kavdane. And Kavdane is extremely rare. So if you want to, especially if you're building this deck or something like it in real life for the skirmish season, this card is really expensive. It's like $200 or something. I happen to have one that I got for Classic Constructed and for earlier stuff. But I would, by all means, feel free to just not buy Fyendal Spring Tunic. Just play like this. Courage is going to be the better option in a huge majority of matchups, in my opinion. But then the one other item, but if you are playing Kavdane, Fyendal Spring Tunic's tight. Okay. So then, Gambler's Gloves, last item. Whenever hero rolls a 6-sided die, You may destroy Gambler's Gloves. If you do that, hero rerolls that die. So this is going to be extremely niche. Also, you're only going to play this against KO, not Kano, KO. KO is the dice roll brute, where he rolls dice in order to try and get the bonus stats on his attacks. And basically the way this works is if he does a big attack and it's important and he rolls the thing that's going to double his damage, you make him re-roll it and hope to half his damage. That's how Gambler's Gloves works in that matchup. And so if he has a strength 6 attack and it gets double damage, he gets plus 6 strength. And if you re-roll it and he halves it, it goes down to 3 strength. So that's essentially blocking 9, which is an insane amount. And even if you account for the fact that this is only going to work 2/3 of the time, even if you account for the fact that it's only going to work 2/3 of the time, it's still blocking 6 in expectation, which is a huge amount of defense and well worth playing over the Brave Forge Bracers, in my opinion. We got a question here in the chat. So ZSparkXX saying, I see a lot of decks having 10 out of 80 allotted for equipment, including weapon. Is it the number to aim for usually? That's interesting. So I think in Classic Constructed, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I have 7 allocated for equipment. Or 8 allocated for equipment, including weapon. It really depends. Characters that have 2 weapons are probably going to have more slots allocated for equipment. In the Blitz environment, which is what this deck is for right now, you get 11 slots to spend on equipment and weapons, and some decks honestly can't even spend 11 slots that efficiently. So like right now, I only have 10 things equipped because there just isn't another item that I would consider to give me substantial upside to the point where it's just not even worth equipping another item. And because of that, it depends. I think, I think I have a ninja deck that has a bunch of items for Classic Constructed. But, it's going to really depend a lot on what you're doing and on what your strategy is for some of the matchups like Wizard, where you have to run other items to counter them rather than your normal stuff. Like this Arcanite Skullcap, ironically, given the concept of it, is really bad against Wizard, and it's much better to have the Nullrune Hood, in my opinion. But in Classic Constructed, you might want to not give up a slot for that. It really depends. Okay. So that's those are my items. Those are my item loadouts for the class, and that's a brief breakdown of what I do against opponents. Basically, I do this almost all the time. Nullrune Hood on if fighting Runeblade. All 3 of these Nullrunes on, but you keep the bolters if you're fighting Wizard. Gambler's Gloves if you're fighting KO, and you put in the Fyendal Spring Tunic against Kavdane only. So that is the gist of it. And now we're going to move on from the equipment to the overall cards. So the tactic with this deck, this is a tall deck. It doesn't have any generic attacks at all. Its goal is to just go really big with Dawnblade swings, break through your opponent's defenses, get those counters racking up, and get into that kind of position. So you may notice here that I've grouped things in terms of pitch, and also that I have quite a lot of blue pitch. All these cards are blues, so there are 7 cards that I have 2 copies of and 1 card that I have 1 copy of. That's 15 blues. That's as many blues as I might run in a Classic Constructed Warrior deck, which sounds crazy, but that's honestly the way that you have to do it sometimes. And the reason that I say that is Kano is a much bigger threat in Blitz than in Classic Constructed, so having a large amount of blue is going to help you to use Arcane Barrier if needed. The other good thing about all this blue is that it's going to help you pay for some of your expensive attack reactions. So this deck has a fair amount of expensive attack reactions, which I will get to in a bit, and you want to have the energy to play those in the right circumstance because they can be really strong. Okay, so first off, starting on the left here, Warrior's Valor. We have 2 copies of Warrior's Valor red, 2 copies of Warrior's Valor yellow, 2 copies of Warrior's Valor blue. So we'll highlight the red one. It's probably the best one. Your next weapon attack this turn gains +3 damage, and if this hits, the attack gains go again, and then it itself has go again. So this is a very strong card. The way that Warrior's Valor is going to work typically is it's going to buff up your Dawnblade, then you swing. Like you pitch blue, Warrior's Valor, swing Dawnblade. Now, if you have another card or 2, your opponent doesn't know what to do here because you have potentially some attack reactions coming at them. They really do want to stop your attack to deny the go again and the Dorinthea trigger. But you have the damage buff from the Warrior's Valor as well, and you have the potential for some tricks from hand. So the opponent might overblock, or they might just try their luck at blocking normally, and you may be able to sneak in there with an attack reaction or something. This is a backbone card. This is the most important card to the way that this deck plays, in my opinion, and I think it's so good that I'm even running the yellow card copies. Now, one thing that's interesting about this game is that yellow cards are not very popular, I believe, because they're considered kind of an in-between option. This is one of the few cards that I think is so good that I want to run it on the yellow versions also, because even the yellow version can be very threatening. And so yeah, that's Warrior's Valor, backbone of the deck, and it's gonna basically just set up that situation where I was mentioning earlier. You need to line up both Dorinthea's ability and an effect that gives you go again in order to swing your Dawnblade twice. Warrior's Valor is like a basic way to do that. This card also available pretty cheaply. It's a rare card from Welcome to Rathe, so you can get this. It's not too difficult to obtain this one. Not an expensive card, but it is one of the strongest cards for a tall warrior deck. Okay, that's Warrior's Valor. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the other options for Go Again. So we have Glint the Quicksilver. This one's a little harder to obtain. It is a M rarity. That's a Majestic from the Welcome to Rathe set, and this is going to be target weapon attack gains Go Again as an attack reaction. Reprise, if the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand this chain link, draw a card. And so sometimes you're going to just play this for the Go Again. When you get the Go Again and the card, it's awesome. And this is just going to be another trick that's going to allow you to swing your sword multiple times. This Glint the Quicksilver goes especially well when paired with Singing Steelblade. So Singing Steelblade here is an attack reaction that is going to give target weapon attack +1. It's also going to let you search your deck for an attack reaction card, banish it face up, and then shuffle. You can play that attack reaction, this chain link. So a very common trick is I swing with Dawnblade. My opponent blocks for exactly the amount of damage I'm threatening. I'm going to play Singing Steelblade to give it +1, sneaking over their defense. And then I'm going to find the Glint the Quicksilver, play the Glint the Quicksilver immediately, give it Go Again, and give me a card draw. And all of a sudden, the opponent is now looking at a situation where instead of blocking me, they're letting me in for 1 damage, and I have Go Again, and that means another sword attack may well be incoming. So that's the Glint the Quicksilver Singing Steelblade combo, just kind of another very solid move there. Now, if the opponent has a defense reaction or something, they can stop you. You do need to think about that a little bit, but it's still very solid. And the other thing about Glint is sometimes it's solid even without the reprise. So really, this is just an all-star card. It has a good effect. It has good text. It has good pitch. It has good block. That's just really strong. Then next we have Hit and Run. Hit and Run is similar to Glint. It's usually worse. You have to play it out as an action instead of playing it as a reaction, which can be more surprising to your opponent. But it's going to give your next weapon attack this turn gains Go Again. If you've attacked with a weapon this turn, your next attack this turn gains +1. So that's a very interesting little bonus, but this deck doesn't usually get it. Some decks, Kasai for instance, can often get both parts of this effect. But in this deck, usually I'm just playing it for the Go Again and not getting the +1. However, having more stuff that gives you Go Again is good. It also is a 3 block and a 3 pitch, so it's another nice little resource. And then the last of the Go Again things, I showed you the Warrior's Valor, the Glint, the Hit and Run, the Bolters I showed you previously. The last one, this one unfortunately is actually kind of a difficult card to obtain in real life. It is Spoils of War. This is one of the best warrior cards from the Crucible of War expansion, but because that expansion's out of print, this card is, as of this recording, very expensive. I believe it's like $60 or $70 for one, which is pretty crazy for a card that is not legendary, not, it's just a normal M, but it's so good. And warrior, this card is basically so auto-include, and it's rare enough that the price has gone up a lot. So this card is going to give you your next weapon attack this turn gains +2 attack and Go Again. Note that it gives you Go Again regardless of whether or not it hits, unlike Warrior's Valor. This can be useful with various tricks, not all of which are actually in this deck, but it can be useful. And whenever a weapon you control hits this turn, create 2 copper tokens. Copper tokens are almost always not useful for this deck, but there are rare situations where you're going to want to use them. So the copper token is you can pay 4 energy and destroy it, and to do so, you're going to get a card draw. But because it costs 4 energy, it's difficult to do. It's also not an instant. It's an action that you have to do on your turn. While it does have Go Again, it's usually not all that good unless you're in a situation where you have a hand with too much blue and you're trying to draw into something more threatening. This deck does not play Cash In, which is a card that allows you to discard copper tokens to pay it as an alternate cost, and then lets you draw 2 cards. That can be very strong for Kasai, but I don't feel like I get 4 copper consistently enough to run Cash In. However, Spoils of War is still a great card. Despite that, it's just another Go Again and weapon buff, and I definitely recommend it here. Unfortunately, it is kind of difficult to obtain. If you are having any sort of qualms about buying an expensive card like this, I would suggest replacing it either with a red Driving Blade, which is going to cost 2 instead of 1. It will not give you the copper, but it will give you a bigger weapon buff at 3 instead of 2, as well as the Go Again. Alternatively, you can replace it with a Hit and Run. You could do Hit and Run red, you could do Hit and Run yellow, depending on whether or not you want more stats in the condition where you play it fit for stats or whether or not you want it to be a better pitch under more normal circumstances. So those would be my recommended substitutions if you can't obtain this card. I know it's difficult to get, and I just wanted to throw that in there for anyone who's worrying about that. However, those are the big ones. Spoils of War, Warrior's Valor, Glint, and Hit and Run, as well as the Bolters. Those are my ways of swinging multiple times. I only have one thing that is something that I like to use with unconditional go again. So sometimes with Dorinthea, in a wide deck, you're going to want to make a Dawnblade attack with unconditional go again. Your opponent blocks it, and then you play some other card that was your real plan. This deck, the main plan is the attack, and I'm not running as much unconditional go again. However, I do have these 2 copies of Energy Potion. So Energy Potion is not only the best card to play if you're going first under normal circumstances, but it also is a great card to play after a Glint if your opponent has some defense reaction and stops you and you're not able to swing your sword again, anything like that. Throw down that Energy Potion and you'll be able to destroy it to get 2 energy later on in the game, which can be crucial in the right circumstances. So very solid card. It doesn't block, which can be awkward, but it's really good in the right circumstance. That's the Energy Potion. Okay. So then next up, we're going to move on. We're going to be talking now about the attack reactions that actually let's do the 2 other Dawnblade buffs. So there's 3, the 3 other Dawnblade buffs. So one of them, first off, Ironsong Determination. This card is one of the most crucial cards for this archetype. It will give your weapon +1 attack and dominate until end of turn. Dominate means that the opponent can only defend with 1 card from hand against the attack, and that's really strong. So making it so they can only defend with 1 card against the attack is going to really compromise their ability to put together a huge defense and overblock you. And if you have some attack reactions and stuff, you're going to likely be able to push through and get those counters on Dawnblade, put them in a bad spot. One thing I'll say is that if the opponent has defense reactions in Arsenal, this is going to be a lot worse. So you want to watch out for that. Also, if the opponent still has a ton of armor, it's going to be a lot worse, but sometimes it's still worth it to play just to make them spend those resources now. Very, very strong card. Probably the best card. Well, one of the best cards that you have available. And if you're thinking about, like, I don't know whether or not I want to use bolters yet, I don't know if I want to spend stuff, I might want to wait for a more explosive turn. Ironsong Determination is one of the 2 cards that can really give you a more explosive turn. The really good thing about this also is, unlike the other buffs, it lasts for the whole turn. So if you get that first hit and then you're going to get the opportunity to swing again, Ironsong Determination is going to be there for you both times. Really strong card. Next up, we have Steel Blade. Oh, and it pitches yellow. If you draw it early on and you think your opponent has a defense reaction in Arsenal, or if you're in some situation where you're playing a Warrior Mirror and they still have a ton of armor, you can pitch it and then it will come back to you later in the game when its effect is going to be more relevant, and that can be a very strong move. So overall, excellent card. Next up, we're going to have the Steelblade Supremacy, also an excellent card, and a Dawnblade buff. Unlike Ironsong Determination, it's red. It also lasts for the whole turn, though, and it gives you until end of turn, target weapon gains +2, and whenever this weapon hits, draw a card. So again, and it has go again, of course. So again, just excellent, excellent card. If you play this on your Dawnblade, it's up to Strength 5 base, Strength 6 if you have a counter. Whenever it hits, you're going to draw a card. That's going to make you just so much more threatening. That card draw that you can get from Steelblade Supremacy is sometimes going to be exactly what you need. Furthermore, it lets you, sometimes there's a problem where you're like, oh, I have enough energy to do my buff and my attack reaction, but if I do have to spend the reaction, I won't have enough energy to actually make a second attack. Well, Steelblade Supremacy is there for you because the card draw that you'll get from it will give you the energy that you need to make another attack. So you can rest assured that even if you spend all your energy getting in, the fact that you will get a new card is going to allow you to keep up the pressure anyway. And because it lasts for the whole turn, that second attack is going to be more dangerous than normal. Excellent card, and this is really the main, this is like the other main one along with Ironsong Determination that you want to have with you for your big breakthrough turns. So that's Steelblade Supremacy. And then I have a more humble weapon buff, just a very basic Sharpened Steel, cost 0 +3. You know, this is just going to be stats, and sometimes you just need to make a bigger number. So that can be a good one to just threaten your opponent with some more damage. Very solid. Also blocks for 3. Very solid card. Okay, so that's going to be the Dawnblade buffs. I talked about the ones that will give you the go again and the ones that will just give you the big stats. Next up, we're going to get to a huge component of this deck, the attack reactions. And this deck has a lot of attack reactions. So we have the Ironsong Response blue. So this is a card. You're often going to want to pitch this. You might want to block with it, but it will have reprise. So if the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand this chain link, target weapon attack will gain +1. I'm also running the red version of this, which is +3. So Iron Song Response is a great card because it doesn't cost anything. So you can play it even when you don't have any resources floating, as long as the opponent has defended with a card from hand. And it can be really strong for just sneaking in there and doing some damage. So typically the blue one is a great card to play if you think your opponent might have a defense reaction. You can get in this situation where it's like, let's say I do Warrior's Valor red, swing for 6. My opponent blocks for just 6. I think this guy might have a defense reaction. I'm going to play Iron Song Response blue, go up by 1. If they play that defense reaction, they might have just played one of their good cards, like a red Sink Below or something. And they might have just played one of their best cards to counter a weaker card from you, which is going to give you an advantage in the long run. So these small defense reactions, often you're going to pitch them, but sometimes they can be great for sneaking over a block, especially if you're going, or these small attack reactions rather. Often you're going to pitch them, but sometimes they can be great for sneaking over a block, especially if they mean that the opponent's defense reaction is now going to be spent on something not that big instead of spent more efficiently on bigger damage. Okay, similarly, Out for Blood blue. So Out for Blood blue does cost 1 instead of 0, which is a big downside relative to Iron Song Response. However, you can give it that +1 even if you don't have reprise. So a sample would be, let's say that I do, let's say I'm attacking with Dawnblade for 4. My opponent has a defense reaction from Arsenal for 4. I can still play this for 1 and get in there even though reprise is not active, which is a nice little side benefit. If reprise is active, it's going to give your next attack in the turn +1, which is again really helpful if it's on that first attack, giving you a little buff and allowing you to come in for the second attack and have a higher chance of getting that Dawnblade counter. So that's going to be Out for Blood blue. Blue Overpower, again, you're going to want to pitch with it early. It comes in for just +2 for 3 energy, which is horribly inefficient. You're normally not going to want to play it just for its stats, but if it has reprise, it gets an additional +2, which means that it will be 3 for 4, and it can be enough to, often people are going to overblock you by 3 because the normal attack reactions are going to boost an attack by 3. If someone blocks you for 3 and you overpower them, you're going to sneak in with 1 damage over that overblock and they're going to be sad. That's the blue Overpower. So I showed this card before, but I want to go into it in more detail. Singing Steelblade, this is the one. It's just +1 on its own, but if you have reprise, you are going to be able to search your deck for an attack reaction, banish it face up, and shuffle. You may play that attack reaction, this chain link. So this is normally what you're going to want to do is the play that I discussed earlier, where you do Singing Steelblade into Glint to give it +1, go again, draw a card, and just sneak in over an exact block. But you can also often do Singing Steelblade into Iron Song Response is another good combo. Singing Steelblade into Iron Song Response red is 1 for +4. So that's a great way to get over an overblock by 3. And in some situations, you might even Singing Steelblade to Iron Song Response blue, or even Singing Steelblade just for the +1 and not use it if you're just trying to bait out a defense reaction and you think they have it. One thing to note about that as well is that you do not actually have to get a card when you search, but you do have to shuffle your deck. So you can play this with reprise active, search through your deck, declare that you don't find anything, and shuffle. That's okay. You're not forced to find something, but you do have to shuffle either way. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so then now that we've talked about all the yellow and blue defense reactions, we're going to get to the big guns. Iron Song Response red, I already highlighted, 0 for +3, really good. Nice surprise. Only downside is it does require reprise. Out for Blood red, similar to Out for Blood blue, it's going to give +3. Now the reprise is only going to be +1 regardless of whether or not you're running the blue or the red version. So the reprise is not +3 as well. That would be insane. However, Out for Blood giving you +3 on the basic attack is going to be a solid buff. Doesn't need reprise to do that. Sometimes your opponent might not block in order to, like, you swing, the opponent decides they're not going to block, they're just going to take it and they're going to try to do a big turn of their own. That can be a great time to play an Out for Blood or a Stroke of Foresight, which I'll get to next, to just give you more stats and just hit them harder. So very strong card. The fact that it buffs your next attack can be really helpful for trying to get that second attack through as well. Stroke of Foresight red, target weapon attack gains +3. If the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand this chain link, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. Nice little card there. So you're going to get, again, you have the stat buff that doesn't require reprise, and then it's going to give you a little filtering, potentially finding another card that you could play even that same turn if you have another card left afterwards, or just filtering for your next turns. Very solid card. With or without reprise, this can be good. Also blocks for 3. Almost everything in this deck blocks for 3. I do have the 2 potions, which don't block, 2 sigils of solace, which don't block, but they heal you for 3, which is almost the same, and then Steelblade Shunt, which blocks for 4 instead, but it does require you to pitch. Anyway, Stroke of Foresight, very solid. So Iron Song Response, Out for Blood, Stroke of Foresight are kind of the main line, just +3 attack reactions. This deck does also run Red Overpower, which is 3 for +4. That can be pretty solid in the right circumstance. So playing a red overpower without reprise is the same as playing a blue overpower with reprise. So you can just get a really big number there. And then if you do have reprise enabled, it's going to get an additional +2 and actually hit for 6, which is crazy. That can just like break through someone's defense easily and inflict a lot of damage. Even if they have a defense reaction, they might not be able to stop you. Like if someone blocks exactly and they think, okay, I have a Springboard Somersault in Arsenal for 4 defense, I'm going to be able to stop him even if he has something that gives him +4. You can do Overpower +6 and they can't stop you anymore even with that +4. So really strong card, very expensive. You know, you're not going to be able to play this every time that you draw it, but it's so good when you can get it going that it is worth it in my view. So that's Red Overpower. I also have 1 copy of Rout. So Rout, I think, is a little worse than Red Overpower, but still very strong. So at least in this build. So 2 energy to play it. Target weapon attack gains +3. And with Reprise, if the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand this chain link, you may return target non-equipment defending card to its owner's hand. So this is a solid little thing that you can play out there. And the way that this is going to work in a lot of circumstances, you can throw out an attack and then the opponent blocks. And if you play Rout and it sends back a card that blocked for 3 as well as giving you +3, it's a total of +6 and it's the same swing as a Red Overpower, but it costs 1 less. The problem is that it gives them their card back, so they can play it against you on the next turn. Or if you do this on a first attack and then make another attack, they can just block with the same card again. Also, if you do this on a defense reaction, they can just play the same defense reaction again, which is again not so good. So Rout, very solid card in my opinion, and you normally are going to want to do this on your second attack of the turn, and it's really good if the attack is going to potentially kill them. Those are the best situations to play Rout. If it's on your second attack or if it's potentially going to kill them, because in those situations, the fact that it returns their card to the hand doesn't matter as much. But I am only running 1 copy of it instead of the 2 for Overpower because it is that little bit awkward on the first attack. Sometimes if you play this on a first attack, you can decide not to use Reprise so that you're just pushing through the damage. Sometimes you might also even play this with Reprise not active in order to just push through more damage. It's less efficient than the other cards, but it's not totally horrible. So those are my attack reactions. As you can see, I have quite a lot. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16 attack reactions that give me bonus stats plus the 2 glints. So that's a huge amount of attack reactions to sneak in there and cause trouble for the opponent. And it's going to make this deck quite difficult to defend against because of all the different stuff that might be happening. Your opponent really is going to want to overblock if they're trying to stop you. For sure, and that's going to mean they have less aggression to throw back at you. It's kind of like the old saying goes, the best defense is a good offense. I don't know if that's true all the time, but in this game it often can be, because if your opponent gets stuck into defense mode and is overblocking a ton and stuff in order to try to prevent you from hitting them with all your attack reactions, you're going to be able to get into a good spot for the offense. So those are all the attack reactions that I'm running. And then I do have 2 defensive cards in this deck. So one is Sigil of Solace Red. This is an instant that gains 3 life. I sometimes do not run this card. So I had this in my initial version of the deck, and I have a more recent version that does not run Sigil of Solace, but the extra life here is very helpful. It's especially good against Wizard and against Brute, where they can do things that are very difficult for you to interact with, and sometimes if you've just managed to heal a bit, that's going to be very helpful. In getting around what they're doing. This is also a great card to see on the first turn, whether you're going first or second, as you can heal up and then redraw. Then the other one is Blue Steelblade Shunt. So this card, it's not efficient to play it normally because this deck doesn't run Tunic in most matchups. And as a result of that, you don't want to pitch another card to play this. The situation where you do want to pitch another card to play this is if this is going to kill them, which does happen. If your opponent is at 1 life, you can just play this Steelblade Shunt and they're dead. If they are attacking you with a weapon attack, because the damage from Steelblade Shunt cannot be blocked by armor or by cards from hand. There are a few effects that can block it, so your opponent could play a Sigil of Solace to heal out of the death. The opponent could also use a Bonehead Barrier or a few other things to block it, but those cards are not commonly played. So the Steelblade Shunt is normally you're going to pitch this one early as a blue, and then later on in the game, when you're redrawing it late in the game, your opponent is hopefully low on life, so this is potentially going to be fatal damage. This deck is running 2. I do think it's possible that you would want to only run 1. I have a current build that's only running 1, but this one's a little more defensive than that. So those are all the cards in the deck, and that's the overview. So as you can see, the main game plan here is to go tall, use your buffs like Warrior's Valor, Spoils of War, Hit and Run, Glint. Those buffs will give you Go Again. Then you have other buffs that are going to give you increased damage or cool effects like Steelblade Supremacy or Iron Song Determination, and those effects are going to help you have like those big explosive turns crush through your opponent's defenses, and the attack reactions are going to make it hard for your opponent to block against you. So that's the basic outline of the deck. Now I'm going to go over some cards that I've considered as potential alternates. So first up we have Dauntless. So Dauntless is another Dawnblade buff that is an action instead of a reaction. Costs 1. Next weapon attack this turn gains +3. The next defense reaction card the defending hero plays this turn costs an additional 1 to play. This is specifically a card that I like to play as a countermeasure to some of the more control-oriented decks, especially IRA decks that have a lot of defense reactions. This Dauntless is often going to mean if they have a 0-cost defense reaction like Sink Below or Flick Flack, they're now going to have to pitch another card to play it, which makes it very inefficient. If they have a Unmovable, which costs 3, they're now going to have to pitch a blue and pitch another card or pitch 2 yellows or whatever in order to play Unmovable. Again, very annoying for them to deal with, makes the card way less efficient. The downside of this is that if the opponent has Fyendal Spring Tunic charged up, they can use the Tunic charge to pay for the additional 1, which means that it's going to be a lot less effective in terms of... It means that it's going to be a lot less effective in terms of making them get another card out of their hand, so watch out for that. If you are playing against an opponent with Tunic, Dauntless is going to be more effective if their Tunic is not charged or if it's broken. Thankfully, both of those things happen a fair amount of the time against Dorinthea, so you don't need to worry too much, but that's just a little pointer. Against decks that aren't running defense reactions, this card is not great, but you can still use it as a 1-cost +3, which isn't totally terrible. It's just not as efficient as cards like Sharpened Steel. Okay, so this card I actually have instead of Sigil of Solace in certain builds that are designed to fight Ira even harder, but I do think that it's less good in some of the other matchups. So then next up we have Springboard Somersault. This is a defensive card. It pitches for 2 and it only defends for 2, so you might think this is really bad. I can play normal cards that pitch for 2 and block for 3. But if it's played from Arsenal, it gains an additional +2 up to 4. This is a good card to have in the Dorinthea mirror. This is a good card to have against Rhinar. Sometimes this can be a good card to have against Viscerai. The fact that it's going to be a 0-cost defense reaction for 4 if you set it up, and it's also going to be a yellow pitch, which means that it doesn't slow you down as much against Kano or when you're doing a more aggressive turn or whatever, makes this a very strong card in the Blitz format, I feel. So that's an option if you want to improve your matchup against Rhinar and Dorinthea. Next up, we're going to have Razor Reflex Red. This card does block for 2, and the second part of its ability that is going to give you a attack action card with cost 1 or less Go Again is never going to be relevant because this deck doesn't run any attack action cards, but it is another 1-cost buff for 3, and if you're wanting to get more aggressive, this is totally something that you can slot in just to have more attack reactions and put more pressure on the opponent. Next up, we're going to have Twinning Blade. So Twinning Blade, this is an interesting one. So this does go better with decks that have more things to give extra action points or unconditional Go Again. Because what this does, it lets you attack an additional time with with target sword this turn. Normally, the way that you want to use this is you play, let's say you do Hit and Run or Spoils of War, swing your Dawnblade. Ideally, you have it buffed with one of those other things that lasts for the whole turn. Maybe you have a +1 counter, maybe something like that. Your opponent heavily overblocks to shut down your attack. You play Twinning Blade. Now you can attack an additional time, come in again. Because they overblocked so heavily, they can't stop you the second time, and that's potentially going to lead you to a huge breakthrough. So this card requires setup because it has to work with a unconditional Go Again effect, and there aren't so many of those in the deck. The only things that it's going to work with are the Spoils of War, which is unconditional Go Again, the Hit and Run, which is unconditional Go Again, and the Glint. So you have 6 enablers for it, and you need to be mindful of that. But it's so good in the right circumstance that I still have it as a 1x card in the deck. It can be really, really strong if you have things set up right. And then finally, we're going to have Sink Below Blue. This is a card that I've tried testing out instead of one of the blue attack reactions, so I was running this instead of blue Out for Blood. Again, this helps the Dorinthea mirror a lot. It can be nice against Ira to block their second Karachi, and that little bit of filtering can help you if you draw an awkward hand. A little bit less aggressive, but because it is a blue pitch, it's not giving up a ton, even in the matchups like Kano, where you're going to want to not be playing defense reactions normally. So that's the overview of the deck, guys. That's the quick deck tech. Those are the matchups. This deck has done really well for me. So this deck or variants of it have won me 3 skirmish events right now. I think I've played in 8 skirmishes, and in all 8 of them I made the top 8, and in 3 of them I won the event as a whole. So I've been doing pretty well with this build. I think it's well poised to fight Ira. So Ira's defense with all the flick-flack and stuff is great against decks that are going wide, but because this deck's going tall, it's much more difficult for Ira to stop you. And then furthermore, I think that it has pretty good matchups against other stuff. The worst matchup might be Kano. Kano can be very difficult for this, especially if you're not running the sigils and you're running like if you're running Dauntless instead of Sigil, which I'm currently doing. That's definitely I think that's almost certainly a downgrade against Kano. But the plus side is that Kano is pretty rare, at least in the like US, North American, European meta. From what I've seen so far, Kano is very uncommon. The people that are playing Kano are not always as experienced as the guys that you might see in New Zealand. And Kano is really vulnerable to tournament fatigue. I wrote an article about this on my blog, TowerNumberNine.com. You can check it out if you like. But Kano is very vulnerable to tournament fatigue. And as a result of that vulnerability, by the time that you're in round 8 or 9, that Kano player might be making mistakes and giving you the edge. After all, most of the other decks, I don't feel like it has super unfavorable matchups. So I'm extremely favored against Ira overall. So I think I have something like a 80% win rate against Ira or something like that. I think I have more than that if you count just skirmish events. And actually, the only player who has beat me on Ira is Dante Delfico, who is one of the strongest players that I've been encountering in these events. He's the, I think, number 2 most experienced player in Canada. He's currently in a race with another guy to be the first to 1,000. So he's a really strong player. He also plays a more control-oriented Ira deck that doesn't have some of the 2 blocks and stuff that other decks do, which can be weak against this. But even against his control style Ira deck, and him as a very strong player, I've done pretty well. So I think he is slightly advantaged. Against me overall. But I think that I am slightly advantaged against him in the cut. So, maybe that's just good fortune for me in winning a few more when it matters more or something like that. But, even against that very experienced player playing a version of the deck that this is weaker against, I have still managed to have a pretty good record. In fact, I think 2 of my 3 wins, actually, I think all 3 of my 3 wins have been in events where I have run into Dante in the cut and then beaten him and gone on to win. 2 of those, I was playing him in the finals. Now, he's also beaten me in the finals once, and he beat me in like the top 8 or top 4 another time. So I'm not undefeated against him in the cut by any means, but I've put up a pretty good record even against him, who I consider to be the strongest Ira player that I've encountered, at least thus far. Or at least perhaps the one whose deck is best matched up against this. So my overall win rate against Ira is like also crazily high. It's like 80% or more or something. And against non-Dante Iras, it's 100%. So at least with the most recent versions. So if you're looking at something that can fight against the Ira menace, this is a pretty solid deck. If you're really worried about Ira, you might want to put in that Dauntless instead of Sigil. I do think the Sigil is good in other matchups, though. Springboard Somersault might be a good thing to include if you're worried about the Dorinthea mirror, or if you are worried about Rhinar. Those are both decks that Springboard Somersault can help a lot against. And yeah, overall, very interesting situation. I've written some articles and stuff about this. If you check out my blog at TowerNumberNine.com, I've written like 5 tournament reports. Ironically, I did not write tournament reports for 2 of the events that I actually won, but I have the first one that I won is up there. And I have some other ones where I made the cut but did not ultimately prevail. And you can hear my rundown of how the games went. And there's one in the first article. I also go into it in the deck style and stuff in some detail, though this video is more detailed because I went card by card here and not in the other stuff. So anyway, that's going to do it for this broadcast, guys. Thanks to you all for watching.